So again, I just want to introduce our presenters for today. Chuck Roscoe, he's the VP of Operations, and Kent Hunter, Senior Tech Support here at Cybra. Chuck, if you want, we can run over the agenda right now.
Exactly. Yeah. Nobody likes to listen to me talk, so I have a very small role. I'll go over the agenda. Then the plan is we turn it over to Ken. If I see a number of you folks that you've attended some of our previous webinars, so it's a similar look and feel. Where we'll hand over to Ken, and he will be showing you these features and functions live within JMagic and MarkMagic. So all you folks signed up, so you kind of know what it's all about. We have some newer input file types, XML, JSON, and CSV. And the full disclosure for you folks, I think you all know this, but I'll mention again, we have kind of two MarkMagic products. One is MarkMagic PI, which you'll see there on the first bullet, which the current version is version 10. It's been out for over about a year now. And PI stands for Platform Independent. So MarkMagic PI is written 100% in Java. It's great for running on Windows, Linux, AIX, up in the cloud, and all that good stuff. And everything we're showing you today, in fact, I'm pretty sure he's going to use exclusively MarkMagic PI, so version 10. MarkMagic, just classic, or MarkMagic I, is also the current version is version 10. And a chunk of the features that Ken will be showing will be available when version 11 is released this summer. So you have something to look forward to, everyone. So you got version 11 coming up, which will include on the AS400 or IBM I or iSeries, whatever we call it nowadays. So that MarkMagic edition, version 11 will include XML, JSON, and CSV. So we're kind of giving those folks, I see a lot of people on the line, probably more than half are IBM customers and prospects and all that. So you're going to see a little bit of a sneak peek of what's coming in version 11. By all means, you can use or purchase MarkMagic PI if you want to use that. We have a number of accounts that use both of our licenses in different scenarios. But it's really neat what Ken's going to show with the different file types. And then digging a little deeper, he's going to show using our SQL feature, which you don't even need to know SQL, but I'm sure a number of you do know the syntax. And SQL has been around since August of last year, and that's on both. So that's both MarkMagic PI and even version 10 of MarkMagic IBM I has this SQL feature. So he's going to show even getting a little fancy pulling data from one of these other, outside of the normal world file types. So like a CSV file type, pulling data from there, then using SQL to pull data in from another totally different database, which is pretty neat. So I will shut up and I will pass it over to Ken, where he can start his demo. And as Phil mentioned, please use that questions box. You can use all that like anytime. I can interrupt Ken, he's in the middle of something. I know how much he loves that. Or just wait till the end and ask some questions, but just load up those questions and we'll get those answered for you guys. So thank you, Ken. Take it away.
No, you're welcome. No problem. Okay. Well, hope everyone sees my screen here. I've got our JMagic tool open, and I've got a form open. It's designed under our laser printer driver, but it's none of this. What I'm going to show you today is limited to just laser. It's for any label, any driver in MarkMagic, because we're talking about the data as it's coming into MarkMagic. So, but the way I've got this format designed right now should be a pretty standard setup as you've got for any regular label design. You've got your data fields, your MarkMagic data fields. If anyone's experienced with MarkMagic, which I know a bunch of you are, you create your data fields. Those are the fields that the data comes into from, well, currently right now, your database on the AS400 or a flat file. If you're doing MarkMagic PI, the data would go into the first field in proper order. So the current issue right now, for example, I'll open up a flat file that I've got here that would work with this format. And you can see it's just one long, sort of tough to work with string of data. You look at it, it's just, It ends up filling into all of these data fields on the left-hand side perfectly. And that's something you have to consider when you're creating data currently in MarkMagic AS400 world and MarkMagic PI. If you're still using flat file, you have to space everything out properly so that the first 10 pieces of data fit perfectly into the order date. And then immediately following that, you have to pass 10 more characters, and that's going to flow into the order number. And then right after that, and so on, 10 more characters go into ship date. And if for any reason you mess that up, that string, you're off by one space, you put data that was supposed to go into route, and you put it way too early in the string, everything would be thrown off because the data is processed in a it's called buffer position. And that's worked fine for forever, as long as you kept that in mind when you're creating the data for the input into the MarkMagic program. But now that we've got the ability to pull data from more than just flat files and AS400 DB2 database files, we can pull in from a CSV file now, for example. I'll open one up here. I've got a CSV file, and it'll just open up in Excel, because that's excels at that, if you will. And if we look at this, if you just note the top row are a bunch of field names. And this CSV is required, the way you have to set this up to interact with MarkMagic now is you create the field names on the top row. So order date, see order date there, order number, and so on. One thing I want to mention though, the order isn't important anymore now that you're getting into this XML world, CSV world, JSON world. We go by field name now, which I can almost hear the clapping on the other end of the line. That's been something that I've wanted for a long time, especially on the AS400 side, to be able to just pass a field name in, here's the data, off you go. It doesn't matter the order, doesn't matter the position, here. For example, I've got order date, order number, and then there's this customer number. Well, customer number is not here, it's not here, it's way at the end. But if I were to run a print from this CSV file, we're going to just go by field name. So CSNum, oh, here's data for CSNum. It's going to end up going into the data field CSNum on the format. So the top row is always the field names. Order doesn't matter. And then the next rows after that are all the actual data. So this is going to end up printing 3 pages worth of information. And I can do that right now. If I go into JMagic, I can do a print preview. Let me minimize this other screen so it doesn't keep popping up. So I did a print preview. And right here, if you've been doing print previews in JMagic now, especially in the PI world, you'd see really the only choice is layout and flat file. We've been doing flat file for the longest time. No, I'm sorry. You can do PI world, excuse me, CSV, JSON, and XML right now. Those will be available. You'll see those in MarkMagic PI. I meant to say AS400, if you do the print preview, your really only choices are going to be the database file. But for this, I'll do CSV, preview from a CSV, and I just point to the file on my computer, rothpack.csv. Open that up, and you see everything just fills right in. So 3, page 1 of 3, page 2 of 3, 3 of 3. You can even open that one up, the CSV. You can look at it in the regular old text view as well if you wanted. Here, check this out. So you can see this is the raw data, not using Excel. So it's just top row, order names, order, or the field names, excuse me, separated by commas. And then the data below that, all separated by commas as well. So 3 pages worth of info. And just for the sake of just showing off the rest of the data types, we've got XML file and JSON file. If I were to open up an XML file, that would print the same exact data. I'll edit that in Notepad. You can see it's just, obviously XML. It requires a certain structure. If anyone's familiar with XML, you've got your, headers here, and then that you tabbed out and certain structure, escape sequences, etc. So you can see the structures as such. Field data, open. Here's the field name, field data for that field. Close that. Next field, next field, next field, and so on. And you build the records that way. So that's one record there. Here's the next record, data for the next record. Third record, data for the third record. So this would be like if your program is spitting out XML, you'd have to tell the program, format it in a certain way so that MarkMagic can read it. And then the same with the JSON. It's just structured differently using different characters. So this is ordered, in a certain way, so it's formatted for JSON. So same deal, field name, here's the data for the field name. And something neat too with this is, even with the JSON, like I mentioned, the CSV, the order doesn't matter. It doesn't even matter here. I could easily have quantity at the very top and store code at the bottom if I wanted. We search by field name, so that's the most important thing to realize that. And it's just how, if you want to use JSON, you can format it this way, and you want to use XML, you got to format it a certain way. And then CSV, pretty simple here with the formatting, just top row being the field names. And I can do print previews from those other files too. Print preview, XML, c:/rosspack.xml. And just to prove it's different data, there's XML, 1 page, 2 page, 3 page. So there's the XML. XML for order number 6299 XML. Page 1, 6299 XML. So it's pulling in the data from the XML file for that one. And then same with the JSON. I'm not going to go through with that, but JSON. And if I point it towards the JSON file, everything will get filled in just like that. So you saw the different structures, the different field types you can now use. Print previewing from them in JMagic. It's the same with printing. So when you call MarkMagic to print, there'd be a flag in the print command saying, hey, MarkMagic, this is JSON data. Here's my JSON file. Hey, MarkMagic, here comes an XML file. Pass the XML file.
Hey, Ken, I got a question. I don't know if you planned on covering this, quite frankly, or not, but I'm going to throw you maybe a curveball. It's from Shrish. His first question, it's a multi-part, is can you use so he's a MMPI user. Can you use the API calls, our REST APIs, for CSV data? I know the answer to that is yes.
Absolutely.
And then he says, if yes, does it mean a CSV containing multiple rows supports bulk generation of labels? For example, one API call with multiple rows returns multiple ZPL labels. And he's talking about Zebra.
Yeah, absolutely. So if I were to send this CSV, this whole bunch of data, right in the API call, that there's a parameter where you can just pass data in the call, the body. If I were to just copy paste this chunk of data right in there, it'll work, and you'll end up getting 3 prints. The first record is always the field names, as we mentioned, but then these 3 here you'll get 3 labels. If I had 1,000 here, you'd get 1,000 labels. 1,000 rows of data. Yeah.
And if you wanted, you could even burst that and do separate calls, like each of those 3 labels go into different areas if you wanted to, or different printers based off of the rule sets. I mean, all that's fair game, just like regular printing, right?
Oh yeah, print transformer. If you had our add-on option and you had a rule set that was looking at like order number, split it off, and then have it print to different spots. Sure.
Perfect. Okay, I got a thanks from Shrish, so I think we answered his question.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ken. Sorry to
You're
interrupt,
welcome.
but that's super important. Keep those questions coming, folks.
No problem. Please do. Yeah. Okay. So, and then along with being able to print preview from them, print from them, those extra file types. We also added in new GUI elements under the file format menu here to be able to create your own JSON files and CSV files and the like. So the work with flat file has been there forever, and people who are using the latest version of MMPI will also see these new GUI elements right now. In the future for JMagic 11, these will be added for IBM iWorld as well. So work with CSV, for example. If I would just do, format, create a CSV file, it's sort of just like that Excel spreadsheet you just saw, except you don't have to specify the field names, they're already up there. And you can just start typing in some data. This is manual creation. I don't expect too many people to start doing manual typing, but especially when you're doing XML or JSON, you'd be able to create the file and it would create the structure for you so that maybe you could import that into your program. But just to show, I wanted to come into the CSV part to show you that we also support, because if anyone's familiar with CSV, the standard, there's different delimiter characters that could be defined. Maybe you've got a file that you've created on your end that you've been using forever that uses custom delimiters and characters and quote characters. Now, these are all standard, these are all characters that are expected to be there in the CSV file. Obviously, a standard delimiter in the CSV world is the comma, hence the comma separated value, but it doesn't have to be. If your file uses different delimiter characters, we can support that. You just have to create a custom delimiter setting. And when you print in MarkMagic, there will also be another field in the print command to tell us which custom delimiter group you're defining. So if your file uses some wacky delimiter settings, you can create a custom group and then tell MarkMagic to use that so we can read your file correctly. I'll just close that down. See, don't close, yes, without save. I always get confused at that one. And then wanted to show you the work with XML, because I can make a really quick XML file. Let's say I wanted to print a label that only used route, for example, right? RT57 or so. I'm typing in some random data and I'll do a save. And so I created a new XML file, save it on my desktop. XML.xml, whatever I want to call it, doesn't matter. Close. So I wanted to show you here that if I were to open this in Notepad, we're just passing field name and data. And if I were to print this format with just this XML, the data would show up under route, no problem, down here. If I were to use the flat file method or the database method, I'd have to create some large, spacing right in before everything so that the route was, so far down here in the data field list. I'd have to add like 100 spaces before, and that's silly, especially when you're getting into these huge master formats. They might have thousands of data fields on them. If you wanted to print a simple label that used a field that's like 400 fields deep, you'd have to create this flat file string with a bunch of spaces in it. And then finally, like the 1,000th space over, you got your data. Now you just pass the field name and the data, and it all fills right in. So it's super simple now. That's
Yeah,
why I
and
love
I
it.
was just wanted to add to that, because we've got a number of accounts that have been started using this over the last year or so. And I've seen it both ways, where accounts, especially with the CSV, they already have a CSV file. They don't need MarkMagic's help or JMagic's help to create a CSV file. They have the CSV file, all this product information that they want to, now they just want to use, hey, we got MarkMagic, let's use that to print the data. So that's fine. Start with your own CSV, and then it's just a matter of getting those fields, as data fields in the format, or just as regular fields, on the first row there, and off you go.
Yeah, this was actual customer CSV right here that I'm borrowing.
Oh, it is. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so it's perfect. So we could just take your current CSV. Then we've had accounts, other accounts. This is pretty wild because I didn't expect this one, where they were using MarkMagic PI, in this case, obviously with flat files, And they're like, you know what? Well, now that you have this, you have JSON, we would love to use JSON. So instead of them programming and make their own JSON file, they went into their master format, right in MarkMagic, right in JMagic, and they had over 700 fields in there. And they used that work with that Ken was just showing, and it said, you know what? Create the JSON, and boom. And we just created that JSON for that totally matches up to the master format. And now they have that as a placeholder, and then they just programmatically update that JSON file and use it for printing. So
Master format, yeah. For example,
mhm.
1,000, not 1,000, but it could be. But there's 171 fields on here. Let's say I just wanted to print a label that uses item number and order date. I could just do format, work with JSON, file, create JSON, scroll all the way to the right. We still show everything here, but if I were to do add a new record, order date /20/2022, and then item number, IT, save, desktop, JSON, save, close. So here's this. So if I had a label that was married to this master format, this is all you'd need to pass in the body of your print call, order date, and then the data for order date, item, data for the item number, and that's it. You wouldn't have to worry about creating a flat file that has all the spaces that would fill all these other fields in, and then finally you got to the item number, so it's all buffered properly, and that world's gone. So like when I do demos now and show off the product to people, I rarely even mention flat files anymore, honestly. I go right into these CSV and JSONs and stuff like that now. So
Don't worry,
I like it that
IBM
much.
A200 folks, it's coming your way too. Don't you
Yep.
worry, it's coming your way.
Can't wait.
Yeah.
So when I did the print and the preview of that, and if anyone was looking at the data and they saw, oh, there's even an email address there. That's pretty cool. How's that? They're passing email. Well, if we look at the CSV again and take a peek at that, there's no email address in here at all. What's going on? Where'd that email address come from? So along with being able to pull data from a CSV, XML, JSON, that data is treated like any other data. Once it gets into MarkMagic, you can use that data in, like what Chuck mentioned earlier with Print Transformer, and using that data in conditions and rules for decision making. You can also use that data in SQL lookups. So utilities and JMagic utilities SQL fields, I can create an SQL statement right on this format that says, I've got a database set up in my company here, an Oracle database. We have our own here, Cybra Oracle, that has a bunch of customer info in it. It's running on a Linux server somewhere on our network, and there's a little initial setup once you want to start using SQL and MarkMagic. You have to define a connection in the administrative panel, tell MarkMagic where your server is, the IP, and login. Once you have that set up, you can write these SQL statements on your forms. Any of your forms can have any number of these on it, to just grab some extra data that maybe you're not passing email in your CSV or JSON, but you're passing something that could be used to go out and fetch that data from your Oracle database or your MySQL database or whatever. So I use since I'm not a programmer, I'm learning. I could probably write this out now that I've started using this in JMagic. I'm getting a little better at SQL, but I'll use the wizard here. I'll just simple setup here. I can just browse out. You can browse out to the tables and browse. You're actually browsing the Oracle database that connects directly up, and you're able to pull in fields, say look up email from the database and put it into, I should have named the fields different, but there's a data field on my format called email that I placed on my MarkMagic format. So it's pulling in the email address from the database. It's going to put it in the data field called email, and it's going to use the customer ID that's already being passed in my CSV as a compare. So it's going to compare the customer ID to the field cust ID in the Oracle database. So being able to create these SQL statements to retrieve extra data is going to be super handy.
You know,
How
kind of
about do a preview? Here it comes. There it
interrupting
is.
again now, Ken, I got a question from Patrick since we're on the subject of data. He's an IBM AS400 customer user, and he is asking about spooled file data, if that can be used with the SQL feature as well. So I'm just kind of ad-libbing here a little bit, but I would think it's something like, so they got their, SCS spool file out there. We're grabbing data from it, maybe for an invoice, and there's an invoice number or maybe an order number that's in that data. And can they use that, a field or multiple fields in that spool file, page by page, and look up data that may be in another database file, totally outside of the AS400?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, the spool file data, database data, any data that comes into MarkMagic from wherever. We don't care if it's coming in from a spool file, flat file. If it's getting onto the form in some way, it could be used as in the SQL lookup, print transformer, condition, rule. So yeah, so it's coming in. You know, if all this stuff is spool file data, it doesn't matter. So if this customer ID is on line 5, column 50 in your spool file, doesn't matter. We don't care. Here it is on the form, and I can create an SQL statement that says use customer ID to pull in the email from my Oracle database and put it in data field email, and there it is. And then, I mean, heck, once you do that, then you could even do more conditions. I'm going a little off, a little side thing here, but I can say I could actually create a rule set that says, hey, is there an email address here? Yes, no. If there is, send this page only as an email. If there is no email, print it to printer ABC. So, you know, once that data comes in through SQL, even could be used as a rule set in your print transformer rule that you set up. So I think
Awesome.
we'll be doing webinars on that, or there's all webinars on that too that we've got if you want to look those up, print transformer and how cool that is. So, but
Yeah, so here, I don't know, I'll throw you maybe a little bit of a curveball here from Mark, because I'm not sure if I know the answer to this. So Mark is asking, what if you have a data field in the CSV called email? So EMAIL. Can you also have a SQL statement that overrides it based on rules? So print transformers, rules, or conditions that you just talked about.
oh, you're already passing data
Mm-hmm.
that's maybe either wrong or you just want to update
But the
it after
field
the
is
fact.
there. It's there as a header called email.
Oh, it would be fine. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if I had email here and then just
Right.
some junk, maybe
Yep.
it would overwrite, because the whole SQL lookup, I think, is one of the last steps. There's a whole string that happens in a row. The data comes in, it gets processed, then it goes through other lookups, and then SQL, I think, is one of the last things. And
Yep.
then once the SQL is done, then the SQL data is last, and
So
it's sitting there.
the correct information will get put in there. That was a good question, Mark. Okay, but you're safe. We'll use the last data that was looked up, even if the
Yeah.
same exact field names are in there. Cool. Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's what I have for you. I'm good at quick intro to the new field types and print previewing from them, printing from them. I didn't show the actual print process, but because it's a little bit different depending on AS400 IBMI, but you know, just letting you know that you'll be able to fully utilize the CSV and any extra custom delimiter sets you might have. So I can't wait to see what people do with this and how it makes your printing life way easier. It's helped me a lot, even just doing simple test formats, not even having to worry about these ugly long flat file strings or huge database files just to print a little piece of data at the end or what have you. So yeah, thanks.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. So a couple questions, and then we'll wrap things up. But Bintu asked one. I think you touched on it, but let's just make sure we're clear on it. She's asking if the order of the data. So the order of the data in the JSON or CSV or XML, I think is what she's referring to. Is that important? And do you have to pass every field? Do you have
Yep.
to send every field to it?
Nope. You can pass just the ones you want.
Right. Yep.
You can pass it in any order. I can do like something like this. If I had route and then I wanted to pass ship date, I can just what is it? SHP date, and then the data for that can go right after the route. It doesn't matter.
Gotcha. And she has a
22.
follow-up question. Oh, this is a good one. Can this be used with print monitor? So again, I'm going to add some color to that. So our print monitor is kind of like that automatic printing. I think some of you folks on the line use that feature within MarkMagic, where we could be looking at a directory or an LQ, for a particular file type. And so I think what she's asking is if a CSV file, if you just drop in the CSV file, something maybe you've been using for the last number of years, you just drop that into that directory, can we automatically use it to print it? Just like a text file in the past or flat file or any of that. There's no difference. So you do have all that capability. And that's another important thing for you AS400 folks, because something you're not probably used to thinking about. Even though we're running there on the AS400, you may have some ad hoc, type of labeling or form requirements using a CSV file. Some user comes to you, hey, I got to do this. Which you can certainly do if you want to do some coding and all that then on the AS400, but you can just use the license on the AS400 and just use the CSV data, and you can just drop it on the IFS in that case. And that's, again, in version 11, that'll be available in August. So it's a different way of thinking of the AS400 version of the product that I'm just kind of recognizing myself right now. That you can use it for these other smaller jobs too, because of these different input types that are supported.
Yeah, monitoring folders on the IFS. Yeah, that's really cool.
Exactly. And now just one last question, and I'll turn it back to you, Phil. This is from Scott. He's asking, so on the SQL feature, are you limited to one database connection?
Oh no.
Okay. Yeah, because you showed just one, but I know we have accounts that actually chain out the other ones, right? They'll go from Oracle to SQL Server.
Yeah, when you remember when I mentioned that there's the initial setup. Once you get the license for SQL, you define your connections in the admin panel. You can define any number of connections, and then Oracle database or SQL database or MySQL or whatever, Microsoft SQL. Then when you create these new connections or create the new SQL statements, you go to add, you'd see a list here. You pick the database you want to go out to, and then you choose your different one, and then you just start doing your thing, browsing out and finding which fields you want in tables. So.
All right, I lied. I'm not going to turn it back to Phil yet, because that's another question coming from Cody.
Oh, great.
Cody asks, can you use XML to create multiple pages just like the CSV method?
Oh yeah, that was a little it's tough to tell what these large SQL or XML files, excuse me, and it's all in the structure here. So there's the whole thing's print data from top to bottom, print data open, and then you'll see at the very end, print data at the bottom, and then there's print record. So print record contains all the fields. So if you go scroll down, here's the end of print record. See, print record close / print record. So there's all the data in there for the fields in the first record. Here's print record, another one. Data for print record 3, and there you go. There's the end, and then there's print data end.
Nice. And all right, one final question from Oleg, just because maybe it was a little confusing the way I explained at the beginning, where the CSV, all this input stuff, the CSV, JSON, XML, that's available and has been available for almost a year in MarkMagic PI, the Java version of it, version 10. It's being added as we speak, and it's going for AS400 accounts, which Oleg you are. That's going to be version 11 that will be available. So as long as you have, to answer your question, as long as you have support with us, you can upgrade from version 10 to a version 11 for free, or from whatever version you're on. Maybe you're on version 9.5. as there's no cost at all that to upgrade. But if you have requirements now where you can use MarkMagic PI, that's available for download on the website.
Yeah, why not?
And you can use that. So
try it out. Yeah, I'm running MarkMagic PI on my own PC here. I have a little server running, got my formats. I'm doing all this on my computer right now.
It's super powerful. As much as I love the AS400, and I still do, it's amazing on the PI side where you can do just even on a little laptop, you know, when you can bust out lots of printing. So Phil, I'll pass it back over to you. So thank you very much, Ken. That was great. And thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Yeah, awesome. No, I don't have much to add. I just want to say, thank you to everyone who showed up today. We had a really well attended. We got really great questions that came through. So yeah, we kept it under 40 minutes. So good job, guys. So I think that's all I got for today.
Great. Thank you, everyone.